Although identified by the general public as a superhero narrative, the primary characters featured in Watchmen are the furthest thing from heroes you could imagine. But this is perhaps why the graphic novel is still regarded to this day as a titan of comic book fiction. Author Alan Moore presents with this book the superhero archetype in its most brutally realistic and, well, brutal form imaginable. The titular team features members so overcome by their personal flaws they truly justify the fact that these are all regular members of society going out of their way to don a mask and costume and fight crime. But while overwhelmed by their misguided attempts to spread what they call justice, we as viewers cannot help but continue to admire their efforts to make the world a better place. All of them, except one. Edward Blake, the comedian, a hero within the Watchmen continuity that is perhaps the least deserving of that title. Yet what drives him to act in the way he does throughout the story continues to compel readers to this very day. 1939. Edward Blake makes his official debut as the comedian after thwarting a jewellery heist in New York. He is eventually invited to join the Minutemen, the first ever team comprised of costumed crime fighters. Due to being the youngest member of the team, Blake would ironically joke that he would be the one to bury each one of them. 1940. Comedian rapes Silk Spectre while she gets changed after taking the group photo together. The disgusting deed is soon intervened by Hooded Justice, who brutally beats the comedian before kicking him out of the room, allowing Silk Spectre to get back to her feet. Soon after, Hooded Justice disappears. The comedian is suspected of murdering the hero, yet nothing concrete emerges from this conspiracy. 1949. To the horrors of everyone else in the Minutemen, Blake enters into a consensual relationship with Silk Spectre. Despite all that's happened, Silk Spectre claims to have loved the comedian. The Minutemen disband. Silk Spectre gives birth to comedian's daughter, unbeknownst to him, a fact that comes to the comedian's attention much later down the line. 1966. Now donning a new suit, Blake joins the Watchmen, the next generation of costumed heroes. However, Blake is not impressed by the new attempts to spread justice and berates Ozymandias and the rest of the group during the first meeting. This leads Blake to burn the map before leaving. 1971. The comedian enlists to fight in Vietnam as a costumed crime fighter along with Dr. Manhattan. After America wins the war, comedian shoots down a Vietnamese woman who is pregnant with his child after she scars him with a broken glass. Dr. Manhattan witnesses the event, yet does nothing to prevent Blake's actions. Comedian then berates Manhattan for standing there and letting it happen rather than use his powers to intervene. He then accuses Manhattan of his disregard for human life, verbally slating him for his self-absorbed position of superiority. Blake strives to prove the point that, despite being the only hero in existence to possess otherworldly powers, deep down, Manhattan is just as depraved as the comedian himself, allowing humanity to tear each other apart, to stay true to their savage, barbaric nature, all while Manhattan does nothing to prevent such savagery. It turns out that the comedian's nihilistic perspective of life spreads further than anyone might wish to believe. 1977. Comedian and the Second Night Owl are called to respond to a riot protesting against the legal existence of superheroes. In response to the riot, comedian acts violently towards the protesters, gunning some of them down, killing many, showing no regard whatsoever of the same people he's meant to protect. His actions within this sequence ironically proves the government's and the public's point about how heroes are actually a plague upon society and confirms how liable the Keene Act has been all along. The comedian is the living prime example of this antithesis. When Night Owl asks the comedian, "What happened to us? What happened to the American dream?" Comedian responds, "What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it." Further indicative of how Blake acts as an embodiment of America's true face. Rather than a force of patriotic justice and opportunity, the dream actually takes the form of a disgusting, depraved, irredeemable monster who is willing to get whatever he wants at any despicable cost. The argument can also be made of how Nixon and the politicians behind the Cold War prove Blake's theory, as they also have no moral righteousness to do what they can to prevent nuclear war. They simply let the odds play out according to the nature of humanity, just as the comedian does. But it turns out that the nature of humanity is truly ugly. One of the final moments in the comedian's life is the breakdown he experiences in front of Moloch, where, in a drunken outburst, He regrets and repents for all the wrong things he did in his life. The rant becomes too much too quick. Blake becomes over-emotional. He grabs Moloch by the collar. He's hectic. He can't control his thoughts. There's something bothering him. Something he has no control over. Something that has shattered his entire worldview. Now you see, this moment in front of Moloch is where the comedian's character and the motivation behind said character truly comes into play. You see, the comedian views war, death, and violence as inherent parts of human nature. His acceptance of these atrocities stem from the belief that they are inevitable and part of a chaotic, meaningless world. His nihilism allows him to justify his own actions by claiming that nothing ever matters, not even human rights. He will violate absolutely any man or woman that comes his way simply to feed his sadistic needs. But then he hears the biggest joke of all. A joke he doesn't get, and it breaks him. Ozymandias is going to drop an alien squid in the middle of New York City, killing millions in an effort to unite the world against a common enemy. An enemy that isn't even real. It shatters his beliefs, because he thought he understood the world, but he didn't. There's a game being played far above his expertise, and he doesn't understand it. He was able to cope with the dark, disgusting, seedy reality of the world he was in by simply accepting that that's how it had to be, and he might as well embrace it. But now there's a guy who will do so much worse than he could have ever imagined in the pursuit of a better world. As if life is a stand-up routine where Ozymandias one-ups the comedian on his own stage. It doesn't fit with his beliefs. It contradicts his entire reality. The final moments of the comedian's life, murdered in his apartment, an old man filled with bitterness and regret, who lived for an ideology that meant nothing by the very end, killed by the very thing that made him who he was, a monster disguised as a superhero. A violent life ended violently. Yet at his own funeral, the funeral of a man who raped his colleagues, shot pregnant women, and gunned down innocent civilians, the US military lay out an American flag for his coffin, celebrating the man like the hero everyone thought he was. This is the purest example of the superhero hypocrisy of the Watchmen universe. There was no justice or reasoning to the comedian's life or the motivation behind his horrific actions. And that's precisely the point. It was all one big joke.